up today, President Park Geun-hye visits the southeastern quake-hit city of Gyeongju, pledging support and follow-up measures. She also signals the area could receive special disaster relief from the government. US President Barack Obama tells world leaders at the UN General Assembly that North Korea's recent nuclear test threatens the entire world. He says Pyongyang must face consequences for its actions. Plus, lawmakers will take aim at top government officials for a second day at the National Assembly, questioning them on topics related to national security and foreign affairs. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, September 21st here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye paid a visit to the southeastern city of Gyeongju on Tuesday, an area jolted by two powerful earthquakes last week and a strong aftershock on Monday, vowing full government support for recovery and countermeasures. She hinted as well at designating the city as a special disaster zone. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-son reports.
Visiting the quake-stricken city, which has seen continuous aftershocks, President Park offered words of comfort to the Gyeongju residents and vowed the government's full support and recovery measures for the region. The president ordered officials to consider designating the city as a special disaster zone, which would make it eligible for special government relief and financial aid.
특별 재난 지역으로 이렇게 좀 선포하는 거를 적극 검토하기로 그렇게 얘기를 했습니다. 그래서 다시 안정을 찾고 일어서실 수 있도록 정부가 모든 지원을 아끼지 않겠습니다.
Park also visited the nearby Wolseong nuclear power plant, calling for thorough safety checks and disaster prevention measures. She said the countermeasures must be prepared from scratch, with the mindset that South Korea is not safe from earthquakes and that more quakes can follow.
국민 생명하고 직결이 되는 것이기 때문에 한치의 실수도 있을 수가 없는 시설 아니겠습니까? 그래서 안전지대가 아니다. 지진도 날 수 있다는 생각으로 한 번 더 대책을 잘 마련하시기를 바라고.
President Park ordered officials to devise field manuals for various emergencies, including earthquakes, so the public can know what to do when disaster strikes. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Now, the recent earthquakes in Korea have raised concerns, as the country has never really had to worry about them too much before. But efforts are underway to ensure the safety of citizens following the recent turn of events. Hwang Ho-jun reports.
3 strong tremors and nearly 400 aftershocks, all within a week, and all practically in the same neighborhood. The unprecedented seismic events had the government doing away with the widely held notion that Korea is virtually earthquake-free. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport said in a press release that it will seek to revise and reinforce the current earthquake-related building codes as a precaution against future quakes. The regulations were last revised in 1988.
We've decided to further expand the regulations to include low-rise structures, which, according to experts, are also vulnerable to earthquakes. We believe the revision will do a great deal to minimize our earthquake vulnerabilities.
Currently, only buildings 3 stories or higher are required to be earthquake-resistant. But when the revision takes effect next year, all new multi-story buildings will have to be earthquake-resistant. Buildings with more than 16 floors will have to publicly certify their earthquake-resistant designs and submit the certification to the government. High-rises of 50 stories and taller will be subject to additional safety evaluations, including the potential effect the skyscrapers may have on their surrounding areas. For buildings that currently lack earthquake-proof designs, the government said it will provide incentives to landlords who include seismic retrofitting when rebuilding or renovating. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
US President Barack Obama has warned that North Korea's recent nuclear test endangers the entire world and the regime must face consequences for its reckless actions. Obama's comments came during his speech Tuesday to the UN General Assembly as the UN Security Council works on new sanctions on Pyongyang over its fifth nuclear test. The US leader said that while Iran agrees to accept constraints on its nuclear program, North Korea pushed ahead with a test that threatens global security. He added that the world cannot escape the prospect of a nuclear war unless all nations are committed to stopping the spread of nuclear weapons and pursuing a world without them. Obama also compared the economies of the two Koreas. He said the stark contrast between the success of the South and the, quote, wasteland of the North shows a centrally planned, controlled economy is a dead end. The United States will temporarily deploy 2 B-1B bombers to South Korea on Wednesday as a show of force against North Korea's nuclear missile provocations. An informed source told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency that the move is aimed at reaffirming Washington's commitment to providing South Korea with extended deterrence amid Pyongyang's continual threats. The source said the 2 B-1Bs from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam will land at Osan Air Base located south of Seoul. The US sent 2 B-1Bs to South Korea last week, but they only flew over the peninsula before returning to Guam. No word yet on how long the US bombers will stay in South Korea. The United States and China are investigating a Chinese company suspected of aiding North Korea's weapons program. Beijing's more cooperative attitude is expected to help Washington tighten the screw on the North. Kwon So-ah with the details.
The U.S. and China are reportedly working together to delve into a Chinese conglomerate that's suspected of helping North Korea's nuclear weapons program by ignoring the heavy international sanctions currently imposed on the regime. According to the Wall Street Journal, Chinese police recently launched an investigation into the finances of Wolseong Group. The report says this marks the, quote, most serious effort so far to pursue Chinese companies thought to be helping Kim Jong-un's regime. China's foreign ministry says the efforts made by Beijing can be seen by everyone.
We have always abided by and carried out the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2270 seriously. Regarding the company that you asked about, China's relevant departments are investigating the financial crimes and other unlawful acts of the company in accordance with the law.
South Korea's foreign ministry says it's closely monitoring the case.
The government is continuing and strengthening its strategic communication and cooperation with China on all levels, so that it can play a constructive role in the international community's pressure on North Korea.
A South Korea-U.S. joint study that analyzed the supply chains that make Pyongyang's development of nuclear and missile programs possible says over $500 million of trade were associated with a manufacturing firm within Wolseong Group near the China-North Korea border in Liaoning province. The study says disrupting North Korea's dependence on overseas networks is key to deterring Pyongyang's nuclear program, suggesting that imposing secondary sanctions on Chinese firms that trade with the North would make existing sanctions more effective. It remains to be seen whether China's latest move against North Korea is indicative of a stronger will to fully implement sanctions, and whether that will also produce a stronger UN Security Council resolution. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Lawmakers from South Korea's 3 main political parties fired some pretty tough questions at high-level government officials Tuesday on the first day of a 4-day interpellation session at the National Assembly. Day 2 on this Wednesday will cover topics related to national security and foreign affairs. Park Ji-won with more.
Around a dozen lawmakers from Korea's 3 main political parties grilled high-profile government officials at Parliament on Tuesday. The list of officials in the hot seat included Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won, as well as the Ministers of Justice, Public Safety and Interior. Lawmakers focused their attention on the government's approach to addressing the nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. The controversy surrounding the U.S. missile defense system THAAD was also a key topic.
Some politicians argue that North Korea would not have conducted nuclear tests if the Sunshine Policy had continued and the decision to deploy THAAD hadn't been made. But even in 2006, when the Sunshine Policy was in place, when there was no mention of THAAD, North Korea conducted a nuclear test.
North Korea has long continued its reckless development of nuclear weapons. The THAAD deployment is an inevitable decision by the government to protect the people from the North.
On another front, opposition lawmakers urged the government to set up a new body to investigate corruption cases involving high-profile officials, drawing the objections of the prime minister.
It's now been over 10 years since we started discussing setting up the investigative body. We can no longer rely on the prosecution to reform itself.
We know prosecutors are having problems with self-reform, but we currently have a special prosecutor system, and I think we should use it instead of creating a new investigative body.
Lawmakers also touched on a range of other issues, including a proposal to revise the constitution and the government's crisis management capability amid the recent earthquakes that jolted the southeastern part of the country. The next session on Wednesday will focus on national security and foreign affairs, while the economy will be the main topic on Thursday, and educational and social issues will top the agenda on Friday. 박지원, Arirang News.
The chairman of Korea's fifth largest conglomerate, Lotte Group, is back home this morning after a grueling 18-hour questioning session by prosecutors in Seoul over allegations of corruption and embezzlement. Shin Dongbin was grilled over accusations he orchestrated a series of shady deals between the group's affiliates in the process of mergers and acquisitions and selling the assets of certain affiliates to others at below market prices. The 61-year-old was also quizzed on whether he was directly involved in having executives at Lotte Construction amass slush funds amounting to about $27 million over the past 10 years. Shin reportedly denied all the charges. He said he was unaware of the funds and deals among affiliates were based on management decisions and were not intended to betray the trust of stakeholders. With the 3-month-long probe winding down, the prosecution is considering whether to seek an arrest warrant for Shin. In the meantime, they have decided to indict all the key family members involved in managing the group, including Shin's father and the group's founder, Shin Gyok-ho. Now, urban tourism experts gathered in Seoul on Tuesday. Fair and sustainable tourism was the main topic. Oh Jung-hee shares with us what was discussed by the participants.
City officials, experts, and representatives of international organizations gathered at the International Fair and Sustainable Tourism Forum in downtown Seoul on Tuesday to address the impact that the booming global tourism industry is having on local communities. The event highlights the concept of fair travel, a form of responsible tourism that employs fair trade practices and promotes sustainable development for the area, residents whose lives are disrupted by tourism. The event is part of a pledge by the city of Seoul to promote fair travel in the capital and around the world as part of an agreement with the World Trade Organization.
I believe this forum can be a strong platform to exchange best practices and experiences, discuss challenges and opportunities, future perspectives and changes in the tourism arena.
The forum is a response to the expansion of touristification, in which local shops and residents are driven out of an area because of a rise in tourism. Examples of this in Korea are found in Seoul's Bukchon and Seochon villages, which are home to rows of traditional hanok houses, and Ihwa Mural Village, where the streets are lined with original paintings. Forum participants agreed that in neighborhoods like these, a healthy environment has to be created so the positive effects of tourism, namely activating the local economy, can take hold.
And the problem is that the tourists and the local people are competing for the same resource. The question I often ask is a city going to use tourism to benefit its people, or is the city going to be used by tourists? There's a very big difference between those two things.
Participants will end the two-day forum by issuing a joint communique ahead of the International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development in 2017. The document will lay out action plans for sustaining the culture of local communities while also promoting tourism. 오정희, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back throughout the day with plenty more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin coming up at 10 a.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.